That's it. Okay, so in this webinar, we're going to talk about data, about the how we storage data and the applications in cloud data, local data, and variables. How you can save the data in different parts in the applications, depends on the data you are using. So let's start. I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, here it is. Okay. The first thing you need to know is that I'm going to create a new project. The first thing that you need to know is that well, we have different places for storage data, and some places that you can read and write data in a faster way than in others. For example, if you save data on the cloud, you will have access to this data anywhere in the world, well, with access to the Google servers. So most of the countries in the world, and you can get this data and save this data. But when you are using internet to store your data, it's slower than if you store the data only in the device. So, but it is useful, obviously, if you need this data to be if you need this data in another application or to make queries later. So you have another ways to store data directly on the phone. This is a way to store data in a local database or in a variable, but this data will remain only in the device when the application is installed. So if you uninstall the application, you will not be able to access this data anymore. So let's start with something simple. Let's see that we have these two fields and a button. Okay, so let's say that the first field is for the name, and the second is the age. Okay, and you add a button to save this data. The first way to save this name and age, imagine that is well, we're creating a single form. So the first thing is to remember that we can change the name of the controls on the page to make easy to identify them inside the application. So I can rename this as name and this as age. The control name is different than the placeholder. So we have this button to save this data, and we need to add an event when we press this button. And the first place where we can save this data is on the cloud database. The cloud database we use is the Firebase database. You don't need to have your own Firebase account when you are creating the application on Apphive, since you use our Firebase account. But once your application is compiled and published, you will need a Firebase account to store this data. You don't have limits about data storage, but take in consideration that this storage have a price. You can check the pricing, searching for Firebase pricing, and we use the real-time database, which is this one. So the price is $5 for each gigabyte storage in storage, and $1 for gigabyte for transfer for each gigabyte downloaded. So it's cheap if, especially if you are starting, and you can have multiple simultaneous connections. Usually, you reach this limit for simultaneous connections about 1 million or 2 million users. It depends the usage of your application. It doesn't mean that you can have only 200,000 users. It means that these are the simultaneous users that can read the database exactly at the same time. Okay, so this is the pricing, and you have a free layer, a very generous free layer, which is this one, this no cost. So the first gigabyte for storage is free, and the first 10 gigabytes every month for download are free. So when you are searching, you don't need, it doesn't matter that you need to upgrade when you create your accounts to the pay-as-you-go plan, the Place plan. But when you upgrade, you keep the free layer, so you don't pay at the beginning. Okay, so we are saving this information into the database. So to save information in the database, we use the cloud database function. You will see that we have delete, get, save, and upload files. We can upload files also to the Firebase account, like to upload files like PDF or images. Okay, but for now, we are going to save data into the database. You will see that we don't have the update function, since saving is also useful for update the data. You have this option to update the database cache. We are going to check the cache in a moment, but for now, we are open the database browser to save this data. Once we click on the database browser, we will see this screen with the database, basically. The database are ordered by collections. For example, we can create a collection name, I know, for example, students. Okay. And inside this collection, we have, well, the students. So we can add these fields, for example, a field for name and another one for age. And you can add all these fields that you need. Also, you can add collections inside inside a collection. For example, you can add a collection for I don't know, like grades. And inside this, you can add another collection inside this collection. The ideal structure for data is to store the data that you are going to need in a certain moment in a view on the application. This database is a NoSQL database. So it means that it's not a relational database. So the basics about non-relational database is that the structure of the database needs to be the most accurate to the screens we are going to use in our application. That's why it's a good idea to start first creating the screens you will need in your application, and later start with the structure of the database and also the functions. For example, if I have a screen where I'm going to need the picture and the image for each student, so I know that I need to have a field on the database with the picture in the same collection. If not, imagine that on the list with all the students, I not need the picture. So I can create a new collection for students detail and store all the other fields, including the picture, the description, all the others. The bio or something. Okay, so you can have another different collection if you don't need to get all this data at the same time. So it's important to have first your screens and then start with the structure of your data. Okay, so we have the name and the age. You will see that we have an identifier. If we don't change it, a random identifier is created every time that we store something into the database. Or we can define a custom identifier. Taking consideration that if we store two records using the same identifier, instead of add a new record, we are going to date this record. Okay, so for now, we are going to use a random identifier. And so we have these two fields, the name and the age. So since we are inside the save data in the web function, we can choose where what is the data that we are going to save into these two fields. We're going to use the entry bars and choose the name. You know that the second tab is about the controls we have on the screen. So we are choosing the name, since we have this control over here that we rename as name. And the same with the second, we have the control for age. Okay, so we are able to see the data here. If we click on view data, you will see the data here. So let's test this in our application. I'm going to test in my, well, I can test in the web, but for now I'm going to use my phone. 1 second. Yeah, here is. So I have my phone here. Data webinar data. So you see, I can add a name, for example, Jonathan age 20, and click on save. And you see that in the exact moment that I save the data in the phone, I see my data here. So in that way, I can store any other data. For example, I'm going to change for games 3, save. And now what you will see that the data is storing in the cloud database. So this is the easy way to save data. So once the data is saved, you will have different callbacks. For example, if there was an error saving data, env that will be called always, and data save only when it was success. No, env doesn't matter if it fails or what success will be called every time. So imagine that when the data is saved, because as you see right now, once I click on save, the fields still have this the data I enter on that field. So if I want to clean these fields, I can use a modify control. In data to send, I'm going to write a space and delete it. So to send empty data. Second is choose the name and modify the value. So with this modify control, I'm going to get empty this first field. I'm going to copy this function and do exactly the same with the age. Okay, so With this, I'm going to press save, save these two fields into the database. And once this information is saved, I'm going to clean my form. And also I can send, for example, an alert or a toast notification. Imagine with a short toast notification in the center, just with an OK or data set. Well, what you need. So let's test it with another name. I'm going to open, well, it's not necessary to have open the data. It's just for show that the data is saving right now. John, 3 or 4. Save, and you see that it's okay. And now the two fields are empty. Okay, so yeah, well, this is a basic form to save data. So this is the first way to save data, which is in the cloud. When the data is in the cloud, you are able to see this data on the cloud. You are able to export this data, or also you can import data. When you export data, this data is exported on a JSON field that, well, you can open on an editor. You will see this this data is here. Is format documents. So you see that here is the data for age and name, and here is the random ID that we have for each record. Okay, so if you need this information on another format, you can convert this. We are going to check this at the end. I'm going to share with you some links so you can convert the data. Okay, so this is to save in the cloud database. Another way to save data is in the local database. I'm going to create a new page and with a field and a button. Okay. I'm going to save only the name this time. So we have another way to save data. This time we're going to save data using the local database. Okay. Well, to save the data in the local database is very similar. If you use the same local storage data, it's exactly the same as in the cloud database. But you will see that it's a different structure because you have a structure for the cloud database and another one for the local database. For example, I'm going to save here the names and the name. You see that this time we don't have a button to see the data we have. This is because this data is not stored in the cloud. So there is no way to get this data on the cloud since this data is only in the phone. But this data is storing in the local database. But you save the data in the same way. Well, this time I didn't change the name of the control, but I know this text field. So when I press the save button, I'm going to save the data on the local database. Okay, so for example, I'm going to reload my application. And for example, I'm going to write Jonathan and click on save. Okay, so this data is saved on the local database. Well, you can send a message once the data is saved. So how you can get this data to know what data is stored on the local database? You can read this data also with a function. So I'm going to add a new screen to read data local. So to get this data, you can use the get local storage data. So if I use get local storage data, I can open the data browser names, and if I only choose a collection, I'm going to get all the records I have inside this collection. Okay. If I write or I can set from a variable that we're going to check in a moment, you can get a specific record. But for now, I'm going to read all the records. Well, I just have one. And you can just get storage data. And you can have, for example, empty data if you don't have any data, success retrieving data, and retrieving data. And is called always. Doesn't matter that was success, empty, or error if there was an error reading the data. So on end, that is called always, I'm going to send an alert with this information, with the information we get from this function to get local storage data. So I'm going to use this from previous outputs. So I can use the information that we get from the local data and show this information in an alert. So let's see. I'm going to use this in my phone to update this and read local data. And you see that I have this record that I have on my local database. Okay, so in this way, well, I can read the data. Also, in the same, it's exactly the same when I am reading data from the cloud database. So both cloud and local works in the same way, but the only difference is that local storage data is stored only on my device, and the cloud is stored on the Firebase. So taking consideration that the local storage data will be deleted if you uninstall the application or delete all the application cache, since this information is stored in the phone. Doesn't matter if you reboot the application or reboot the phone, the information remains on the device until you uninstall the application or delete the files related to the to the application in the phone. The cloud database remains. It doesn't matter if you uninstall the application of the phone because it's on the cloud already. Okay, so in this way we can save and read information from the database. So, but how we can display this information into, for example, to create we're going to create a simple list with the information we read from the database. So let's add a new screen. The first thing that we need to do is to add always an event on load. On load will be called when this page is load. For example, I'm going to get information from the database on the cloud. So I'm going to press get database data. And you see, when I use get database data, I have different filters here. You have the order by to order the information I'm getting. Limit to last, limit to first. Here you can enter a number, but you need to know that limit to last, limit to first, filter, and add, and start at. All these fields depends on order by. So imagine that I am reading, I'm going to click on open database browser, and I'm reading all the records for the users, okay? So if I want to get only the users older than 13, so I need to enter here in the order by the name of the field. For example, I'm going to order by age, and I'm going to get only the users that start at 30 years old. So this theory refers to age or end at 35. So in this case, I'm getting only students from 30 to 35. Okay, or if this is in case of range, or if I want to filter for a specific age, so I can use the filter option. Okay, or if I want to get only the younger, so I get the first student, or the 5 older students, so I write 5 here. So in this way, you can filter the data you are getting in the database. You can enable the real-time database if you want to update on real time each time that something changed in this query. And well, this is the time to refresh. The time to refresh is basically the cache. So it means it's useful, especially if you don't enable the real-time database. So if I write in seconds, for example, 60 seconds, it means that if I open this screen and I get all the student, and I open within again or refresh the screen within the next 60 seconds, instead of get again the data from the server, from Firebase, I'm going to use the data that I already get or the data I already have on cache. So it's useful if you don't expect to get this data updated in certain time. You can use this as a cache option. So it's going to make this application faster. My recommendation is don't use the cache, the time to refresh, until you finish your application, because sometimes you forget that you have this time here and will be a little confusing when you are creating your application because you are not getting the last data from the database. So this is great to improve the speed of the application and reduce the cost of Firebase, but it's a good idea to do it at the end when you finish to create your application. Another good practice is when you use order by to limit the number of results. For example, if you want to get only the first 10 results, imagine that in your database you have 1 million of records. It's very important to enable this this option, which is it looks like a filter, but basically is to index this this field. If you enable this index, when you read the data and filter the data, the filter of the data is made on the server side, and you are getting only the number of results from the after the filter the data in the phone. So it is, imagine if you have 1 million records and you are reading only the first 5 records and you have 1 million. If you have this index enabled, you are getting only 5 records in your phone. If you don't have this index enabled, you are getting the 1 million records to your phone and will be filtered, but in your phone. So it can take longer and will be more expensive. Also, it's not a good idea to enable all the index. Signs will be some issues with the speed of the application. So the recommendation is enable the index option only with the fields that you are going to use to filter. Basically, the field that you are going to add here on the order by. Okay, so that's the journal for getting database data. Getting database data have more options in the cloud database than the local database, as you see. Since when you save a lot of data in the cloud, you need to filter this data and order this. But when you save in the phone, it's not an issue since you have already the data in the phone. Okay, so once let's see that I don't need to add a field here right now. So I'm going to read all the information from all the students. So once I read the information from the cloud database and I obtain the data, normally it's easy to add always in the end callback. Since sometimes when I start adding some records, I don't have, for example, if it's empty, so if I add the function on the end, I'm sure that the function will be called. Doesn't matter if I don't get any data or I obtain data. So in the end, I'm going to add the function add collections to UI. Add collections to UI allows us to create a list with the data I'm reading from the database. To create a list, I need to have a specific structure on my page. First, I need to have a parent container, which is going to be the limit of the list I am creating, okay? So I'm going to have a list inside this container. Then I'm going to add another container, which is representing a single row or a single element inside this list I am creating. I can divide, for example, this container, which represents a single item. And I'm going to add a text on the left side, a text with the name, and a text on the right side with the age. I can change the styles and order. Okay. So I have the name and the age. This container inside represents only a single item on the list I am creating, and this parent container is the limit of the list. You need to have this specific structure in order to work with the add collection UI. You can create horizontal lists if you enable this. You have list data is the information that will be used to create this list. So I'm going to send the information we are reading from the get database function. And then the list instruction. You have list reverse and scroll inverted if you want to scroll from bottom to top instead of top to bottom, and list reverse to order the order and the bottom instead of the top. Okay. So, and then I'm going to click on modify element. And the first step is to choose where is going to be the list I am creating. You see that I can select this list, but you need to have this specific structure, because if, for example, I have a button inside this list, for example, I have a container, another container, but I have a button inside this list, you can't select where the list is. So the only way to create a list is to have a parent container and a container inside. Okay, so I'm going to select this list. You can enable category tabs if you want to have tabs with the different categories. You can enable the filter for list if you want to allow the user to search and have a filter here inside the list. You have the order by to order the information you have on the list, and you can add the number of columns if you want to add different columns in your list. Okay, the second tab, you will decide which information is going to be on each element on the list. For example, in this first text, this text, I'm going to modify. I can modify different properties of this control: the decoration, the background, the color, or the text. I'm going to change the text of this field, and I'm going to, you will see that you have this entry bar available when you are creating a list. And you have the attribute from output, which I'm going to write the name of the property from the data I am reading to add to this text. In this case is name. I'm writing name here because on the database I am reading, the property I have is name, okay? So this is why I am writing here on the, to modify the text from the list data and to have the name here. And the same in the second one, I'm going to write age, to have the age on this field, okay? The the last tab is to add some functions to each element on the list. For example, you can add an event when I press one single item of my list. You can send the user to another page, for example, push a screen, and send the user to another screen with the detail of this user. For example, if I have the list of all the students, and when I press some student, I'm going to redirect the user to another screen to show the detail of that user. Okay, so that's basically that. This is what we need to create a list, get the information database, and create a list, and define where we are going to add the information that we have from the database. The list, you can create a list from the information of the database, but also you can create lists for information from APIs or any other source of that. Okay, so let's see this on the application. I'm going to reload, and you see that I have my information from the database. No, Jane, John, Jonathan. Also, if I can add, for example, on this screen, a button and a field with a name also, and save also information on this page. I'm going to do the same. For example, I'm going to rename this field as name. And I'm going to save the information. For example, imagine that I have this list here, but I want to save more data in my list. So I can use the same save data on the web, choose the list, the name to save this information on the database. And that's all. For example, I'm going to write another name here, click on save this information into the database. And well, I can send a message when it was success or delete the field if I want. But the important part is that if I enable the real time, when I enable the real time, you will see how this information change when I save more information into the database. What happened when real time is enabled? When real time is enabled, each time that I click on save, the callback will be called again and will create again the list with all the information. Okay, so let's see if I have James, John, Jonathan. Okay, pro tip, when you have fields in your application, you see that the keyboard don't allow me to see what I'm writing. So in the page, you can enable this option to avoid keyboard, okay? So if you enable avoid keyboard, you will see that now I'm going to reload my application. Now when I select the field, all the information on the page moves up to allow me to see what I'm writing. No? Other student. And now when I click on save, you see that the information is updated instantaneously. But this information is also saved in the cloud database. So you will see this information here. Okay, it's not necessary to save all the fields when you save information into the database. Okay, so basically this is the information that you can store on the cloud database, on the local database. You have another ways to save information in your application. These two database, what remains, doesn't matter if the phone restarts, but the cloud keeps the information always, and the local database only while the application is installed. A good practice is to, for example, if you're creating an e-commerce application, you can save the information for the cart on the local database. And once the order is complete, when you save the order, then you read the information from the local database and save this information on the cloud database. Okay. Another ways to save information. you have variables available here. You have variables for context data, which is information for all the application, and also you have page input data. These two kind of variables have different ways to save information. For example, if I create a new screen with the student detail, okay, I have this new screen with the student detail. So if I need to receive the ID of the student from this other page, I can create a variable here. For example, the student ID. Okay. So this variable will be used to receive information or to save information, but this variable will exist only when this page exists. So start existing when I open this page. If I leave this page and navigating, so I will lose this information. But why is useful? For example, imagine that I want to show this information about the name and the age. And the picture of the student. Okay. So I'm going to get the student ID. I'm going to get, for example, the name of the student and the age. Okay. So when I press a single element on the list inside the modify element list item, when I press this row, this element of the list, I'm going to send the user to the student detail. Okay, sorry for the spelling. And you see that I have these three variables now available here to send information to the other page. This information is the information I get from the call database, but I can send this information to the other page. For example, to send the name, I can select the information I have from the list and write name as the name of the field I have on the database, and to send the age, and also send the ID of the record. To send the ID, the ID of the record, I'm going to click here. So I'm sending the ID of the record, the name, and the age. So the information I have for this student, I'm sending to the other page through the page variables. Okay. So I can select a transition and spend. Okay. So when I press an item now, I'm going to send this information to the other page. Let's see if I reload. Now, if I press, for example, with games, I'm open the other page and I already sent the information to the other page. But how can I display this information here? Well, the easy way is to use a modify control. So I'm going to add a function on load and add a modify control. Modify controls is the most used function because it's allow you to modify any control on the page. So what is the data I'm going to modify here? So I'm going to use this last entry bar, and you have the application data, which is these variables you have here. And you have also the page data, which are the variables of the page. And you have these three variables that I created. For example, I'm going to send the name, which is the information I sent from the other page to this page. And I'm going to modify this field. I'm going to rename also as name. Nice. To make easy to identify this field. So I'm going to search for the name, okay, and modify the text. So with this modify control, I am, once the application is, once this screen is loaded, I'm going to modify this control called name with the information I'm getting from the other screen called name, and I'm going to change the text. So let's see how this works. I'm changing only the name. Okay, I'm going to reload. So I have the John. If I press on John, now the other page is open, and you will see that John is on the list. So, but let's see that I want to read more information from the database specifically for John. So I'm going to use the get information from the database. Open database browser, reads the student detail or the students. Well, let's see the student detail. But instead of read all the information, I'm going to read a single record. Imagine that I want to read only the record related to the same student ID. So it means that if in this list, well, I don't have data on this list right now, but imagine that I'm going to have a record here with exactly the same record ID, but in this other list. I'm going to add the record right now. And I have the bio here. And the picture, let's say, sorry. Let's say I'm going to get, have only an image here, an URL. Okay, so image that I have on the student detail for this student, which is James. I have the bio and I have the URL of the picture, but it's exactly the same user ID. So on this page, when it loads, I'm going to read the database again, but this time I'm going to read another collection and read only the student ID for this specific student ID. So I'm getting the student detail, but only for this specific student. Once I read this information and the data is obtained, I can use a modify control to show this information here. For example, from the previous data, from the information I read from the database, I'm going to read the picture. I can write, or I have this list for the picture. I'm going to modify the image and change the source of this image. Okay. So what I'm doing here, I have the list with all the students. I have the collection, the list. When I pressing a single item of the list, I'm sending to the other screen some information, the age, the name, but also the student record. Okay. When this other page opens and loads, I'm receiving this information and I'm using this information to show some information here. I can add another modify control to show the age. And also I am reading again the database, but I am reading from another collection and a specific item from this other collection to get this information only for this student. And with a modify control, I am using this information I get from this second get database to show the image here. So the complete process looks like this. Okay, James, when I press on James, you see that I have my other screen with the image and with the name of James. Okay, what happened if the other record doesn't exist? So nothing is going to happen because I don't have data since I just added this function when I have some data. Okay, so that's all for now. I'm sorry if I do it this fast, but it's because we don't have a lot of time. But you are going to receive this recording at the end of the session in your email. So you can check and practice with this way. This is the basic way with the most important functions to create application, because the data management is one of the most important things when you are creating your application, because in the other webinars we saw the basics about creating the applications, the geolocation. But once you have, for example, the location or the maps, you always save information into the database, read information into the database. But one of the most powerful things that we have here on Apphive is that you are free to add your own data structure and to add saves and loads and use these functions anywhere on your application. So you can create very complex functionalities in your application, and it's an easy way to save and read data and use this data in different parts of your application. So thank you. If you have, okay, so I'm going to stop there recording. Well, a question: what's the best workflow data with university last webinar link? I'm going to check. I'm going to send you an email again with it. Basically, you should receive this automatically with the webinar ends, but well, I'm going to check with you directly to be sure that you have the link of the webinar. I'm going to resend this again. If you don't receive it, please send me a message to support Apphive, and we can resend this if you don't receive it. Okay. What's the best workflow for data with APIs? I already have a video on our YouTube channel about the APIs. You will find this Apphive. If you search for Apphive NoCode APIs, so I'm sending you the link here. Here's the also, if you need more help, also my email is jonathan@apphive.io, so you can message me also. And you have here the APIs integration. So I explained how you can integrate with a custom API, and also I create a list with in a similar way that we did here, but instead of get the data from the database, I'm getting the data from an API and creating a list with this data we are getting from the API. So basically, the flow is similar. It's similar that the flow we did here. It depends of the API, but also there are different ways, because sometimes the APIs are very slow. It depends on the server. So another way could be to get the data from the API, and then you can save this data or into the local database, for example, to have this data available to use in your application instead of make queries to the API every time that you need the data. It depends how fast is your server. In case of the cloud database, it's very fast since they use the Google infrastructure. So they respond in a very easy way. It looks like instantaneous, especially if you are in the US or in a place near to the Google data centers. Okay. So I'm going to stop record, and